You're listening to the Missionary Perspective Podcast with veteran missionaries Erik Johnson and Joshua Mead. We're glad you could join us. We trust this podcast will be both a blessing and a challenge as we relate topics in world evangelism from a missionary perspective. Now, here's Josh and Erik.
Welcome to the Missionary Perspective Podcast. I am your host, Erik Johnson, live here from the sunny DR. Josh, I'm excited because it's finally been raining a little bit and it's starting to get cool. What's life like for you in Senegal there today?
Oh, today is a little bit cooler than it has been for a while. It's been pretty hot, but we've got a few rains here and there. It hasn't been as much rain as we've had in the past, but we've had a good amount. And it has been a busy time since we have been back in Senegal now for, I'd say it's over 2 months now since we returned to Senegal and hit the ground running with all kinds of different outreach and transitions and hosting groups. It's been exciting. It's been tiring because we dove right back into returning to Senegal right in the midst of hot season. So we're hitting 100, 110 degree weather, high humidity because it's rain season. So our bodies are trying to adjust. We're trying to readjust to the food and water, all of that. And so it's been, I'd say we went for a stretch of about 6-7 weeks where we were just nonstop sick, but life keeps going. So we had to try to navigate some sicknesses as well as keeping up with the pace of ministry here. But it's been exciting. We'll do a little bit of catch up. Let's find out what you've been up to in the last little bit. It's been a while. How many months? I think I looked back on our podcast. The last episode was with Brandon Lawrence, Pastor Lawrence.
Right.
That was maybe two months ago, maybe, or more? July.
Well, I know we recorded the end of May. I think we might have shown at the beginning to mid-June. So you and I think it's been since May. And so it's been a while. And I think this is kind of, just what we wanted to do. You probably heard from people like I did. Hey, when's the next podcast coming out? And the truth of the matter is we've always made this not the same kind of priority as our regular life. So it's something that gets kind of shuffled down in the order. But we did want to catch up and just kind of maybe put it out there to show people what a busy ministry cycle can be like. And that's kind of what we want to do, is talk about not just what we've been up to, but at the end of the podcast, maybe just talk about how we have those transitional times from really busy seasons to getting back to your normal routines and maybe the in-betweens. And then as we'll talk with Josh, he's getting to rev back up again. And so that's kind of what the whole point of our podcast is, just talking about our different perspectives and how everyday missionary life is lived. And like you, we've had a routine in the last number of years. We've been going home for about 6 weeks in the summertime due to some things going on with our family, trying to spend more time with them, the kids on their schedules for homeschooling. But this year, because of Holly's pacemaker replacement, we did it in the spring, and I think we picked the hottest summer to stay home in the Dominican Republic. I've always enjoyed going away from the Dominican for about 6 weeks in the summertime, but this year it was a real good scorcher, and so we're thankful that the rainy season's starting to come in and kind of get to that point where you can start breathing again. But for us, when we got back in late April, it has been the same, just running. In fact, once we started in May, we started our very first formal seminary, Sabal Baptist Seminary, and we started in mid-May. Just a few weeks ago, we finished our first course, and the guys did real well, and so we're about to start our next course. We do it once a week, kind of getting their feet wet, and I was very impressed. Our college actually grew throughout the semester, not dwindled. So wow. We're have some more people even signed up for this next semester, next class, and so that's been a real adjustment, but a real joy and satisfaction to see men, some as young as 18, some as old as almost 70 years old, studying the Word of God, going to another level. And so for me, that's been the most satisfying. But we're going to talk a little bit about the summer activities. Josh, since you guys have been back, you've mentioned sickness, but you also mentioned you hosted a group. What kinds of preparations did you do for that group? And when they were there, what kinds of things did you always do?
Well, let's get into that, but I did want to address, you mentioned, your kids' homeschool schedule, and our family well. Our kids have started their homeschooling, and so my son uses headphones for his courses that he does, so I usually use my son's headphones, but the only headphones available was my daughter's, in case you're wondering why they're pink headphones here. So I just want to
I
get
didn't
that
wonder
out
at
of
all. I just figured it was you.
yeah, exactly. Well, very good. Yeah, we hosted a group recently from California, Faith Baptist Church at Canoga Park, and it was their first mission trip to Africa. And
Wow.
everybody on the trip, there were about over 20 people who came, and everybody, it was their first trip. Most of them, there were just a couple that had
Holy
been to
cow.
Africa before, but the majority of them had never been to Africa even at all. And so it was an eye-opening trip for them. One of the things I love about hosting mission trips, especially if it's the first time people on the trip have ever been outside of the country or have ever stepped foot in Africa, is it takes me back to when we first arrived in Senegal. Do you remember that first, it's kind of like your first day of school. Everybody's starting school. There's something about that first day of school when you were a kid that you're like, it's new, it's going to be a great year.
Yes.
And you're excited. And then the next day it's like, oh, this is boring and dull. And I don't enjoy anyways. So it's kind of like, it takes us back to, things that we've become accustomed to and maybe just have gotten so used to that we forget, oh yeah, that's a part of life here. Yeah, power does go out a lot. Yes, traffic is very annoying, the way that people drive, and all these little nuanced details of everyday life that you become used to. I always enjoy hosting groups like that because it takes me back to, oh yeah, that is different, and we've learned to acclimate and live in this type of community, in this culture, and in this part of the world. And I love to see how a mission trip can make an impact in individual lives for those who go on mission trips. A lot of times, of course, as a missionary, as a church, and even our community was impacted by their outreach. We did quite a bit, and we'll get to a lot of the prep work that went into it. But during their time here, I think, every time we host teams, so often they go away. I think maybe they didn't realize how much it's going to impact them and change them until after it's said and done. Then they return to the States or Canada, wherever they're traveling from. And once you start contemplating what you just experienced, you realize just how much it really expands your worldview. It opens your heart more to the work of the Lord in different parts of the world. And so I know we did an entire podcast in the past on mission trips, but I just want to reiterate again, if you're a missionary, try to host trips. It's hard work. It's very time consuming. And I'm not a natural organizer. And so you really have to lean into maybe some areas that you're not comfortable with. For me, I'm not great at organizing, so I really have to rely on those around me who are. My wife is incredible when it comes to organizing details of the trip, meal planning, all of that. So I really lean on her for a lot of the scheduling and making sure everything's where it needs to be and in place. So really, it begins maybe a year before you're going to host a team. You'll begin discussing with the church, doing a mission trip. And I found, Erik, that most of our mission trips that we host, they usually take place within the year after we just did a furlough. And so if we're back in the States for 4 months up to a year, we'll get a big cluster of mission trips in the year following us coming back because we're in person.
Makes sense.
And whenever I'm in a church, I always invite at least the pastor to come see the work, come see it firsthand, or I let them know we'd love to host a mission trip. Now, we do let people know up front that Senegal is I think a little bit different than maybe other mission trips that you might take.
Certainly.
One, there's the language barrier, of course. But two, it's just the state of church planting in Senegal is not at the same level it is in maybe some other countries. And the way we like to do an orientation when people arrive, and we have our pastor, Malik Job, he shares the testimony of his family, and it really puts it into perspective about what to expect on the trip when he shares the fact that when his father came to Christ, as far as they know, in our region of the world, in northern Senegal, he's the first Wolof, that's his ethnic group, the first
Right.
Wolof to become a believer, to follow Jesus in this area. Now, maybe there were others that were just, in secret. And that was back in the 90s. And so that just gives you an idea of how young the Christian movement is among the Wolof people, which is the primary people group that we focus on. Now, there are multiple ethnic groups, and some are more open than others. And so our church has a wide range of different ethnic backgrounds, of Senegalese ethnic groups. But that being said, it really helps put in perspective. I think it's important, Erik, in your preparation to set expectations for the leader of the team. You don't have to set it as much for those who are coming on the trip, but let the leader know this is kind of what you can expect when you come, especially if it's a pastor or youth pastor or mission pastor who has been on other mission trips. Your dynamic might be different than another mission field. And so I think it helps, at least for us, because it is such a unique way that we do outreach here. And we let people know, we don't go out and do mass distribution, passing out flyers door to door to invite people to church on Sunday for a big Sunday, because this is a 98% Muslim country. They're just not going to come to church for a big day. It doesn't matter what you market it as.
Promise.
It just doesn't happen that way. And so there's much more individual one-on-one engagement that you make when we do evangelism. And so the way we approach hosting a team is that we're going to take advantage of having a large group with us to impact the community as a whole with ministry and outreach that will allow us to display the love of Christ through giving, through ministering, through interaction. And through that interaction, whether it's sports, whether it's medical distribution, and I can we'll go through a little bit of what we did with this group that came. You as the host have to know, okay, what is it we're doing, and then set those expectations for the team coming. Because that was one of the questions that the pastor brought up, who oversaw this group that just came. He asked us, hey, do you want us? We have a big printing, we can print some materials. Would you like us to bring invitations or print anything? And for this trip, we just didn't need any materials printed. We have cards that we distribute that allow people to find our social media sites, our WhatsApp connections. They can get in touch with us so that we can pursue any sort of communication and follow-up. And so, building up to it, you start planning it with whoever's going to be the lead on the team. You begin to discuss, what you have planned. Now, sometimes a church might mention, hey, do you have any specific outreach that you need a budget for beside what it's going to cost to host the team? And so I think if in our last episode, a while back when we talked about mission trips, we talked about budgeting for food and budgeting for transportation and make sure you coordinate all that. But I would say as well, sometimes a church might ask preemptively up front, is there any ministry you want to do that we can send some finances to help? And that's what this church did. And so we had them send about $1,000 to purchase some medical supplies, some clothing that we gave to kids who live on the street, as well as some school supplies that we distributed to a school building we built. And so it's a village where we were able to give some supplies to kids. And so sometimes maybe they don't offer, and so you need to work with whatever budget you have. If they don't plan on sending extra money for a budget for any outreach, then maybe try to plan, okay, for example, a Vacation Bible School out of Arizona sent us $900 to minister to kids. So we took that $900 and we purchased supplies to do work with kids. And then when this team came, we had them do the distribution of the clothes, and we had them do that interaction. And so just make sure you got the budget for it. Have your ministries planned. Try to have a daily plan. And so leading up to it, I would meet with our lead pastor and some of the men on our in our mission team here, and we just start outlining what activities can we do, what outreach do we want to do, where can we make the biggest impact while they're here, and then we started working out the details of, okay, which day are we going to do that? Who do we need to contact if we're going to the village? Let's make sure that, we did a women's outreach in a village, make sure the women are there, and just make sure we're all coordinated with that. And so a lot of planning goes into it, leading up to it. Make sure you got all the transportation coordinated. And then I would say, Eric, just have at least one day of activities planned. That's kind of a given. They're not here for a vacation. They'll tell you that up front, but let them see some of the sights and enjoy some of the nicer parts of your country. And so we went to the sand dunes. They were able to ride camels in the desert and the sand dunes. We did do, there's quads. You can do a tour of the sand dunes all the way to the beach front and then back. They have 6 quads, but then when I got there, they said, oh, by the way, only one is working. Like we had 23 people. We wanted to ride these quads. And
welcome to the mission field.
Exactly. So you got to learn to adapt. You got to be improvise and adapt is the motto for the Marines. Isn't you kind of got to take that motto when you're on the mission field. Well, very good. Well, have you hosted anybody this year? What's the last group you've hosted?
Yeah, well, we had 2 kind of sets that we got to host. We had an intern for about 2.5 weeks who got to be with us, and he's a son of Brandon Lawrence. So our last interview, his son Andrew Lawrence, who is going to his junior year at Ambassador Baptist College. He's a wonderful young man. He feels like the Lord's probably calling him into mission. So when he wanted to come and visit this summer, we really wanted him to be able to be with us when we were going through, all parts of ministry, which would be this prep time that you're speaking of, which really we've been planning for this trip, for this group coming from Georgia. They had 27 with them. We've been planning it for about 1.5 years. And then, so he got to be there for the kind of as you go through and buy all the food and go walk through all the steps. And I kind of was purposeful in trying to let him in on that. So if he's someone's interested in being a missionary. And then he got to experience the whole trip, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then at the end of it, which we'll also talk about, he got to see what it's like after the group goes home and what that's like for the missionary and the downtime and the getting back into a routine. And so I felt like even in 2.5 weeks, which is not a long internship, that he really got to kind of see that and get a really good taste of that. In fact, when we had testimony time with the group itself, he gave a testimony talking about what it was like for the preparation that we had, telling the group, basically Holly and I would wake up in the morning, it was prep all day long and then go to sleep late, then wake up again and do it again. And, he was just telling the group, and we were having long, hard days, but it turned out to be a really wonderful trip. And so we had this group from Georgia come. They had been really planning for about 1.5 years. And what Josh says is true. The more planning you do, and the older you get, obviously you should be able to understand things better. It's going to make your trip so much better. In fact, as I've analyzed the groups in the past, and I think about things after they leave, what I could do better, and what my wife and I could do better. One of the things that we've kind of both come to, and I think maybe both of us are, I think pretty well organized people, especially when it comes to groups. Sometimes we'd be so organized and so maybe by the book, working, making sure the trains run on time, that kind of thing, that we would fail to make real connections sometimes with the group just because you're moving them from point A to point B. I remember seeing a one missionary family friend of ours when they brought a group over. And I mean, this was a group, I'm not really sure what they were doing that week. So I felt really bad because this guy just seemed like he was just driving this group of people around from one spot, one city to the other. We've never done that. We want, and I think it's probably because what we were trained, how we were trained, what we learned at our home church. But we go to do things. We want to be a blessing to the missionary. And as a missionary, I understand that church mission trips want to be a blessing. I always try to, when they start kind of talking about we don't want to be a burden, I try to stop them at the beginning and say, oh, listen, you are going to be a burden, but you can be a blessing. And there's a difference. anybody who's going to bring 27 people over to your house for, 3 meals a day for a week is going to be a burden.
Right.
But that's okay if what we're doing at the end of it is a blessing and it furthers the cause of Christ and people are saved, or at least the gospel seed is planted. So I try to, maybe work on that vernacular a little bit, because it is important to understand that there is a burden on our side, but you also have taken the burden to take off time, spend your money, to come here to a culture you don't know, to be a blessing. And so I was encouraged to be able to have a young man kind of see that. And then what we did was something we've never done before. And that's kind of what I also want to talk a little bit about too, is that I think Josh and I now, we have 14, 15 years on the field. We feel like we've figured out a lot of different things. And so I think as missionaries, you want to be real smart about having people come in. If they're going to do construction, you know how to handle that and get supplies. Or if they're going to do an evangelism, you figured out, as Josh mentioned, in his city, you don't necessarily go door-to-door knocking. He's figured those things out. But also, as I've gotten older, Josh, I've also trying to learn to maybe expand my horizons a little bit and try something new, maybe that I haven't tried before. And so that's what we did with this group. We never really had done baseball evangelism in this way, where we literally would take a American ball team with their coaches, and we would go from field to field, and we'd set this up ahead of time with the coaches of these different fields and different towns, and we would play one, sometimes 2 games. The coach who came, the head coach, he had collected through his network of people over 600 pounds of baseball equipment to donate to each field. And I've given out bats and balls and hats before, and people are very appreciative. But I was overwhelmed by not only the amount of things he brought to give out, but the reception. And so when he's bringing these bags of equipment to these managers, to these kids, and each field had well over 100 kids each time, it was amazing to see their openness to the gospel by seeing these people have come because they care about us. They're coming, giving things back to us. And so I wasn't sure how this would go, but each situation, even to the last day where we didn't actually have it planned, it was more dynamic. We show up at a ball field, and this coach was like, sure, Dominicans are so open. They're like, sure, come play. And he didn't know he was going to be getting anything. And so when they brought out bags of, batting helmets and bats and gloves, these people were overwhelmed. And each field, we saw responses to the gospel, some fields more than others. Each field, we tried to be very strategic. They were all connected very closely with local churches so that we could do follow-up with these players. And in fact, the field that we're most connected with, we've actually now started a bus route from that field. And on Thursday night, in fact, tonight, I will drive out to this ball field, which is about 10 minutes outside of our town, where my son actually plays. And we'll take in anywhere from 7 to 10 ball players on in my car. That's, I'm praying about a new vehicle so we got a little more room.
Yeah.
And we're going to bring him here to the youth group. And so, even though we have done, and we feel like when it comes to an evangelistic outreach, or when it comes to a youth ministry outreach, or it comes to a construction, we've kind of figured it out. This year, we kind of expanded our horizons to see how this would work. And the Lord bless that too. So there's an element of we're telling our experiences, but sometimes you can even say, well, we're going to give that a shot. And so that's how this summer went. And I was thankful for that. We had another set of young men come in for a week, kind of do the same thing. We did some more ministry outreach and got to let them see. And he's another young man who's very interested in missions, actually called into missions. And so it was a full summer. But at the end of the summer, and then we finished the summer off celebrating our 15th anniversary as a church, which really was probably the capstone, because we saw so many people not only saved, but rededicate their lives to the Lord. And you know what? Whenever that happens, Josh, when a lot of good things are happening, Satan is not pleased. And so wouldn't you know it, this week I've spent a lot of my time in counseling sessions because Satan's battling. But that just gives us more encouragement to go forward and keep using our lives for the Lord.
Absolutely. I think you hit on a point there that, you mentioned, what do you do when the mission team goes back home? And I think it's important if you're hosting to be intentional in the type of activities that you're going to have the team in mission trip engage in, and then be intentional in the follow-up. So usually after a team leaves, we're exhausted, right? You're up first in the morning, you're last to go to bed. My wife is up early cooking. She's last to go to bed. And so you're pretty tired. So we take a couple days. They usually off to the airport. We drop them off. And then there's a town nearby that's kind of a tourist town. And we stay there maybe for the weekend and then kind of get recuperated, get our breath back, and then come back. But I think it is important to have ministries that you can follow up on, or that maybe you need to revitalize. So we hadn't been out to this village for quite a while, and having this group was a perfect open door to reinitiate engagement with this village that we had worked in the past. And so we used them to be able to reopen this door. And now at the end of the month, when medical mission outreach comes, a team of 43 people are coming, and they come, we'll actually on this first Saturday they're here, we're going to bus in some people from the village out there. Because I'm telling you, when we went out there, there were 2 people on this mission trip that were medical nurses. And this wasn't a medical outreach, this last team that came from California. But because 2 of the people on there were nurses, we took first aid, we took, some medical supplies with us everywhere we went. And I'm telling you, both the nurses who were here, they were ready to just drop everything and come back because the need is so incredibly overwhelming. There was a child out in the village who has cerebral palsy, and he's never been diagnosed. And one of the nurses said, like, he needs braces on his legs. His mom needs to do these exercises. There's, but it's, if nobody's out there ministering and engaging them, they're just going to leave this child to grow up with no physical therapy at all to help him develop. And so your heart breaks when you realize, man, it's overwhelming sometimes. And when I first begin planning what activities to do, sometimes I get a little depressed because I think, okay, a lot of what we do here in Senegal is not the same as other mission fields. Okay. It's Islamic country. A lot of those believers that we work with are either secret believers, like Nicodemus believers who aren't out in the open yet. So it's a lot of secret, the underground discipleship. We're working with pastors all across West Africa. We have an extensive multimedia outreach. So there's not really much a team could do involved in media. Sometimes I get down thinking, okay, I wanted to host this team. I told them to come, but what am I going to do? I don't want them to just do activities to do activities. And usually I get a little stressed out leading up, like, oh, what am I going to do? Are we going to have enough? Are we just going to be sitting around? And it always ends up there's more than enough to do.
Yeah.
And once you get out there and begin, re-engaging through the group, just having a group here opens doors to get back and revitalize and reinitiate contact with those that maybe we lost contact with. And so it really opened up a lot of doors. And then it's allowing us to follow up. So I would say if you host a team, get refreshed and then do the follow-up.
I have a question for you because I think I know some of the answer, but I want to see, because it's a little more fresh in your mind. How does your family react when North American mission groups come? Is it a joy for them? Is it a struggle? Do the kids, I imagine the kids enjoy having interaction. How does that go for your family?
Yeah, we love it. We love hosting teams from the States and Canada, and our kids love it. Especially, every group is going to have somebody who's just really good with kids, whether it's someone their age that they connect with, or, a young person, young adult who just does a really good job at connecting with kids. And I'm telling you, if you go on a mission trip, if you're in a church in the States or Canada and you go on a mission trip, if you have already a heart for kids, you're not going to waste your time if you put some extra time and invest in the missionary kids. Just spending
100%.
time with them. I cannot, I would start crying, but I cannot tell you what that does. If you get a chance to go on a mission trip and you spend just that, maybe you miss out on a certain ministry outreach, but you're spending that time with the missionary kids, and maybe the kids are a little awkward and you're like, well, I don't really relate with these MKs. Just spend the time with them. I am telling you, the missionary kid that's going to energize them and fuel them for the next 2 or 3 months. Just that interaction that you had. There's one young man who came from a Bible college that this was like 2 years ago. Our kids still talk about him. He spent time with them, invested in them. And so, yeah, our family looks forward to it, especially, if you'll just go that extra mile and just, spend a little time with the kids.
I don't know what it was about this last group we had, and we had a real mix because we had younger 13 to 14-year-olds who were the ball players themselves. Then all of them had at least one parent with them. Then there was some young adults, maybe 19, 20, and then some older adults who were the leaders. So it was a real interesting group. But it was just very interesting that after this group, I realized what's been happening lately, which has been very helpful for Holly and I, is how much our kids step up. Now, I'm sure you know what this is like, Josh. When you pick up a missionary group, for those who don't know this, at the airport, and you get on the bus, you have this idea where you're going to try to connect with people, but you really spend the next hour or whatever the distance is just answering questions about everything they're seeing. It's like they're Winnie the Pooh looking out a window. What's that? What's that? What's that? And you're just answering questions. So one of the things that's awesome about having kids who have grown up in a country is that when you're doing things, these people are asking your kids these questions, and your kids are answering these questions, and they're making connections, and they really feel part of the team. That's how it is with our kids. And so I can usually judge how good a group has been by when I get back from the airport after dropping the group off, how sad my family is because
Yes.
the group is gone, because they really made those connections you're talking about. And it's funny now that I'm actually talking about this. When I was on the other end taking a missions trip, I had such a good time connecting with this one family, the Phillips family, that I really took a liking to their 9-year-old boy that I ended up naming my son after him. And so, it's amazing how you can make a connection on going on the missions trip and then vice versa, being the missionary. And so that is such a good reason why I'd have missions groups, because it really is encouraging. If churches have come with the right mindset, it's been planned properly. I think Josh and I have talked about this, as we mentioned in the other episode. If you really do a good job of doing your due diligence to know who's coming, you're almost guaranteed just to have a good experience. No matter what you really do, it's going to be encouraging to have people who are willing to sacrifice their time, their treasure, and their talents to come help you. And at the end of the day, we understand that you have to be flexible, as Josh mentioned. You may have one quad for 20 people, but when it's all said and done, you're going to have a lot of great memories, and you're really going to be encouraged that people cared enough to come spend time with you.
Absolutely. Well, we've got the medical mission outreach coming at the end of this month, and this takes a lot of coordinating because we've got to bring in medical supplies. We got to get permissions from medical directors, from the Minister of Health, and we're in the process of finalizing all that. We're going to use a school near a clinic in a new part of town where there is no Christian interaction at all in this part of town. It's on an island just across the bridge, and it's going to really open doors to make an initial contact. And that's, again, where with Medical Mission Outreach, I'll go on their website and look at trips they've been on. It'll say how many patients they saw and then how many people got saved. And you'll see anywhere from 150 up to 1,000, got saved on this trip. We might be able to, we might say maybe one or two got saved. I don't know. But I'm telling you, the gospel has not been introduced in this part of the Senegal on the ground. Now you can go online and listen to it, but the people we are reaching, the majority of them may have never interacted with a Christian in their life. And so
breaking new ground.
Exactly. And so I tried, again, going back to what I was talking about, setting expectations. I try to let the medical team coming, anybody who comes, that you are part of the process of missions. In a lot of mission fields you go to, we don't think about the missionaries 100 years ago that were there when nobody was responding, but they were planting the seed and breaking up the ground. We're still in a place where we're breaking up the hardened ground, and we're just now getting the gospel introduced. We're going to see fruit. We just won't see it exponentially like you might in another mission field. But that doesn't mean what you're doing is less important than going to a field where the fruit is more tangible and visible. And so I'm excited about hosting them, and we're looking forward to it. I'll let you get the final word in as we wrap up.
Well, and one thing I was just going to say real quick is that, when that fruit starts to come to fruition, in fact, like I mentioned, we've been able to see this bus route start as a result of the working of the summer. I've been very intentional to send these pictures and these testimonies back to the leaders of the group for them to understand, because I know they need to tell their people so that next time say, hey, remember we did this, the Lord gave us a fruit, and this is why we do it. It's not just for this week; it's for eternity, it's forever. And I think that's really important. Part of the missionary side is to think, hey, who wants to know about this more than just my prayer letter? Especially those who sacrificed to come and really prayed hard that the Lord would do things. And so it's exciting from us to be those people who could tell those who came, hey, this is what God's doing. Thanks for coming. It was worth it. And so missions trips are worth it. I will say I have seen missionaries who do way too many of them. So there's certainly a balance. You have to balance it. Josh mentioned with his family. I totally agree. As soon as missions trips are over, if you can, take your family on a vacation, even if it's a short vacation, to let them know who's most important, and that you really want to spend time with them as well. And we enjoy those times as well. But boy, it's really neat to see how God can use many different people when they come, and just their eyes are open, their eyes are affected by their heart.
Yeah, that's right.
Their heart's affected by their eyes. I said that wrong.
That's right. No, it's an exciting ministry. It's an exciting aspect of missions, and so I would say if you're a missionary and you've never hosted a mission team, consider figuring out how to do it. Try to get some people to your mission field, and if you've never been on a mission trip, it is definitely worth it. Save the funds and try to get on a mission field and just see what God is doing in other parts of the world. Well, I've enjoyed catching up, Erik, and we're going to try to schedule this weekly again over the next few weeks. We'll try the best we can to put these out as consistently as possible up until Christmas. Let's try to make that our goal. I'm going to try to make that my goal. And if you've got any sort of topics you want to hear about it, send it in. Any questions you have about missions, send those in. You can either reach us by email or just comment it on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this podcast on. Like and subscribe, share it with somebody you think it might be a blessing with. And thank you so much for tuning in. This is Josh Mead from Senegal.
Erik from the DR.
God bless. Have a great week.